Isn't it great to be a Democrat in the state of Ohio? Good evening. Before I begin my main remarks tonight, I want to introduce several Democratic Party leaders who are seated on the stage this evening. Former Ohio Secretary of State and the second best baseball trivia expert in the state of Ohio, Representative Sherrod Brown. From Toledo, a leader in the fight for American workers, Representative Marcy Kaptur. From Akron, a former mayor and my former House colleague, Congressman Tom Sawyer. The leader of the House Democratic Caucus, Ohio Representative Pat Sweeney from Cleveland. The first African-American minority leader of the Ohio Senate, Senator Ben Espy. Our Democratic Supreme Court Justices, Alice Roby Resnick of Toledo, and Justice Francis Sweeney of Cleveland. Our two Democratic candidates for the Ohio Supreme Court. You're too early. Straight from winning an impressive 72% of Tuesday's primary vote, Mariana Brown Bettman, Cincinnati. And my good friend, Judge Peter Sikora from Cleveland. The leader of the Ohio Legislative Black Caucus, Senator Jeff Johnson from Cleveland. Representing women elected Democrats of Ohio, Representative Jane Campbell from Cleveland. The President of the Federated Democratic Women of Ohio, Ruby Gilliam from Carroll, Ohio. And the President of the Ohio Young Democrats, Bill DeMora. I also want to recognize, Bill, you want to run for office, Bill, or anytime soon? I also want to recognize two very special Ohio Democrats who are unable to join us here tonight. First, Representative Louis Stokes, the Dean of the Ohio Congressional Delegation. I'm pleased to say that Congressman is now out of the hospital and recuperating at home, and I say get well and lead us to victory in 1996. And I'd also like to acknowledge U.S. Treasurer Mary Ellen Withrow, who pledges to come back to her friends whenever we need her to help carry Ohio for Democrats this November. As I look in the crowd here tonight, my heart is swelled with pride to see over 4,000 of the most committed Democrats this party, this state, and this nation has ever seen. Ladies and gentlemen, it gives me pride to say, as I have been saying for the last 9 months, the Democratic Party is alive and well in the state of Ohio. In the last 9 months, working together, we have brought our party back to life. We have improved our party organization and candidate recruitment efforts and started winning elections again. We've improved communications to the party faithful and expanded our grassroots effort. And tonight, we see the results of that effort. We've also been relentless in our efforts to ensure that no Republican misstatement goes unchallenged. And we have provided a clearer, more consistent, and more focused Democratic message throughout the state of Ohio. Our Democratic Party has always been the party of opportunity for all people, regardless of race, religion, regardless of background or birthplace. Our Democratic Party believes in providing education for all our children so they can reach potential as they're adults. The Democratic Party believes in caring for our elders so they can live life fully and retire with the resources they need and have earned to support themselves in their golden years. And the Democratic Party believes in protecting our environment from those who would steal from our children like thieves in the night, the beauty of our rivers, our streams, and hills in the name of so-called progress. While we are proud of the headway we've made as a party, our greatest opportunity and greatest challenge is yet to come. Each one of us here needs to leave this hall tonight with a personal commitment to do all those things that Democrats do best to win elections. And you all know what that means. That means going back to the basics. It means making those calls, mailing those letters, knocking on those doors, raising that money, and communicating our party's message to the voters of Ohio. Make no mistake about it, we have a lot of work to do. In the House, we must take back 7 seats from the Republicans to make Pat Sweeney the Speaker of the Ohio House of Representatives. And Ohio Democrats are going to do just that. In the Senate, we need 4 seats to make Ben Espy the President of the Ohio Senate, and Ohio Democrats are going to do just that. In the Supreme Court, we have the opportunity to create a Democratic majority by electing Mariana Brown Bettman and Peter Sikora, and Ohio Democrats are going to do just that. And in the Congress, Ohio has more potential Democratic victories than any other state in the nation, and that means Ohio will do its part to make Newt Gingrich the ex-Speaker of the House of Representatives. And now, last but not least, there's another race I'd like to talk about, just in case you thought I forgot, Mr. President. But just for a moment, I want to talk about what the opposition, the Republicans, are doing. I'm sure many of you heard Bob Dole came to Ohio last week and in fact attended a rally very much like this one. Now. Let's be fair. I'm sure the Republican Party did their very best to turn out an enthusiastic crowd, but the truth was, the sad truth was, after all their effort and all their patronage, they could only muster a fourth of the crowd we have here tonight. And that was for a free event. In fact, it was almost comical to watch Republican office holders in the state of Ohio try to prop up their anointed presidential candidate and to try to show some excitement about his chances in Ohio here in November. But in sharp contrast to what Republicans think about their nominee, I am proud to say that Democrats are united as never before behind our president. We are united behind a man who has worked hard for Ohio, a man who has fought for our core values, and a man who has stood up to the Newt Gingriches and the Bob Doles and the radical right-wing Republicans who value AK-47s more than they value children and families. A man who has stood up to preserve America, the America we know and love. And I promise you tonight, as God is my witness, Ohio will be proud to lead the nation in re-electing Bill Clinton president in 1996. Those of you who have traveled around the state of Ohio with me have heard me say this before, but there's no better place than to say it here tonight. When we Democrats stand together, shoulder to shoulder, when we work together side by side, and when we vote together as a team and in unity, as the oldest political party in the history of the world, there's not a force on this planet that can stop us. Thank you, Ohio Democrats. Let's win in '96. And now, I'd like to introduce one of tonight's special guests. Ladies and gentlemen, it's my pleasure to introduce to you my mentor, my good friend, and a great chairman of the Democratic National Committee, Mr. Don Fowler.
Don't you think Dave Leland is a great chair of the Ohio Democratic Party? "32 weeks and 3 days from today is Election Day. We're going to the polls and re-elect Bill Clinton, President of the United States." For years. 4 more years. 4 more years. 4 more years. It's easy to get a rile out of you, isn't it? Yes! It's great to be in the home of the Ohio State Buckeyes, the Cleveland Indians, and the Cincinnati Bengals. Ohio is a microcosm of America. Big cities, small towns, farms, great educational institutions, a mix of religion and ethnic backgrounds that shape and form and reflect all of the good values and opportunities and future and hope of America. Ohio is a bellwether state. Ohio goes with the winner, and Ohio will go with Bill Clinton on November the 5th. And as Ohio goes, so goes America. In 1962, John Glenn became an instant hero. He was a man who had already served his nation with honor and distinction, but this one act made him a hero in the history of America, unmatched by any other. That's enough for most people, but John Glenn had a vision for the future and a dedication to the people of Ohio and this country. He came back to Ohio, he ran for the Senate and was elected, and has served in that body with great distinction and integrity. John Glenn does you proud and does Ohio proud and does America proud in the United States Senate. He is a man who's made of the right stuff. Shakespeare said it a little differently. He said, he does that which he does out of a good conscience and a common concern for all. The elements of nature are so mixed in him that all the world stands and says, this is a man, your great Senator, John Glenn.
Thank you. Thank you all. Thank you much. Thank you. Thank you all. Thank you much. Thank you. Good. Thank you all, and thank you, Don Fowler, for that warm and very generous introduction. And before we go any further, I want to add what's already been done here. I just think what's coming together here in Ohio is really something, and we really owe a debt of gratitude to our new state chairman. Let's give a hand to Dave Leland for all the job he's doing. Dave. I'm honored to be asked tonight to introduce our guest of honor. But since he's a well-known student of history, I know President Clinton won't mind if I begin by citing two historical facts. The first fact is, no Republican has ever been elected president without carrying Ohio. The second fact is that in 1992, Bill Clinton clinched both the nomination and the general election right here in the Buckeye State. Good. And Mr. President, 4,000 Democrats have come here tonight to tell you that in 1996, history will repeat itself and Ohio will again lead the way in sending you back to the White House. Means we'll have to beat our opponents in November, but so far at least, I'm happy to say the Republicans have been doing a pretty good job of beating themselves. Let's face it, the Republican primaries this year, they've had all the substance and dignity of a good food fight in the school cafeteria. but now it's just about over on their side. It looks like Bob Dole will be the Republican nominee, and I guess that's good. Well, because if Pat Buchanan were ever elected, there were a lot of people telling me they think he'd be the first president in American history to nominate people for the Supreme Court who wear white robes. And just last week, for instance, Governor Voinovich threw a party for Bob Dole here in Columbus. And in his prepared remarks, the governor said, and I quote, "Hopefully in 1999, I will join Mike DeWine in the Senate so that together we can help President Dole." Well, I've got some news for our governor. In 1999, Bob Dole won't be president, George Voinovich won't be a senator, and Ohio won't have a Republican governor. Remember not too long ago when the Republicans used to love talking about their so-called contract with America. I have viewed much of it as contract on America, not with America, but, well, they don't talk about it much anymore. Maybe that's because they haven't gotten much of their contract passed by the Congress that they now control. Or maybe it's because Newt Gingrich's approval ratings have fallen faster than Steve Forbes' campaign bank account. But mostly I think it's because the American people have come to see the contract for what it always was in the first place. It was an election year gimmick designed to disguise the true Republican agenda of favoring the rich and forgetting the rest. But if they won't talk about their contract, then we Democrats should be talking about ours, because the fact is that in 1992, Bill Clinton ran for president promising to create jobs, reduce the deficit, fight crime, preserve the environment, help students, and protect senior citizens. And in 1996, Bill Clinton will be re-elected because he has delivered on each and every one of those promises. He promised an economic plan that would end the recession and create 8 million new jobs in 4 years. Big job. When he sent that plan to Congress, the Republicans opposed it, and we passed it in the Senate without a single Republican vote, not a one. Al Gore broke the tie that day. It was a very dramatic moment in the Senate, and we passed that package that this president had sent to us. Newt Gingrich said the president's program would, and I quote, "kill jobs and lead to a recession." Dick Armey said the impact on job creations would be devastating. And our Congressman John Kasich called the president's plan, and I quote, "a job killer." Well, now it's 3 years later, and the Clinton plan has created not just 8 million jobs, but almost 8.5 million new jobs for this country. Here in Ohio, unemployment has fallen from 7.5% when President Clinton took office to just 5%, announced today, 5%. And we've been averaging 100,000 new jobs per year. So let me ask you this question. With a great jobs record like that, will Bill Clinton have your support on November 5th? Good. Four more years. In 1992, Bill Clinton also promised to reduce the federal deficit without raising income taxes on average Americans. And under his plan, taxes have not gone up for working families, but the yearly deficit has been cut in half and has fallen for 3 years in a row. It's the first time that's happened since Harry Truman was in the White House. response from the other side is the so-called flat tax proposal. It's a wonderfully Republican idea that would allow the idle rich living off investments to avoid paying any income taxes at all. But of course, the cooks, the maids, the chauffeurs would have to pay taxes on every dime that they earn. That's class warfare, Republican style. They don't want Americans to ask what we can do for our country. They want us to ask, what can we do for their country clubs? But that's not all. According to a top economist at Northwestern, the Republican flat tax plan would also explode the federal deficit to the tune of $1 trillion over the next 5 years, or by $200 billion each and every year it was in effect. So much for fairness, so much for the middle class, and so much for their so-called expressed concern, their crocodile tears over the federal budget deficit. So let me ask you once again, with a deficit-cutting record like this, will Bill Clinton have your support on November 5th? Finally, Bill Clinton also promised in 1992 he would fight crime, get America back on track, without savaging Medicare, gutting our environmental laws, or slashing support for education and job training. And on these promises, too, Bill Clinton has kept his word. The Clinton crime bill takes dead aim at outlaws by banning assault weapons from our neighborhoods, putting 100,000 new cops on the beat, and taking violent repeat offenders off our streets by telling them 3 strikes and you're out. And for nearly 4 years, Bill Clinton has stood firm and held fast against Republican attempts to cut $270 billion out of Medicare and billions more from education, job training, and environmental programs. But our opponents simply refuse to give up on their extremist agenda. Just yesterday, the House of Representatives passed a bill that would repeal the ban on assault weapons. Yeah. You know, I used to hunt some. I know the president, I haven't been hunting for a number of years. I'd be ashamed to stand out in the woods and think I had to have an AK-47 to hit something out there. I'll tell you that. Now they're threatening again to shut down the federal government if they don't get their way on huge budget cuts for students and workers in need of training. Even while they're doing these things, they're telling us over and over how concerned they are about crime, how committed they are to senior citizens, and how much they really, truly want to help the children of this country. Well, I've said it before, and I'll say it again. You don't make streets safe by filling them with assault weapons. And you don't protect senior citizens by needlessly scaring them and slashing their Medicare. And you do not help children by taking Big Bird away from 5-year-olds, school lunches away from 10-year-olds, summer jobs away from 15-year-olds, and student loans away from 20-year-olds. I'll tell you though, we're lucky. We're lucky. We're fortunate. We're lucky. We're fortunate. America has a president who won't be bullied and extorted and pushed around. He's not going to turn his back on crime victims or on senior citizens or kids in schools. You know, when they were campaigning around Ohio just a couple of weeks ago, Senator Dole and our governor, Governor Voinovich, talked about old veto Bill. And that seems to be a theme. In fact, it was published in a paper in Washington. That might well be a theme they try and run into the campaign this fall. Old veto bill. Well, let me say to any senior citizens who are here, the Republicans tried to cut your health coverage, and you can just be thankful that President Bill Clinton protected you by vetoing that bill. And to any students here, good for you. They tried to cut your chance to go to college, and just be thankful President Bill Clinton protected you by vetoing that bill. We all want clean air, clean water. They tried to cut funds for those. They tried to cut funds. Be thankful President Clinton vetoed those bills also. So, ladies and gentlemen, my fellow and sister Democrats, this year this state will once again be a crucial battleground, and we cannot afford to lose. So let's get ready for it. Let's start right here and now. Let's get on our feet, out of chairs, make a big noise, a big, loud, and long Ohio welcome to a good and decent man, a man with a view of where this country should go and how to get there, a great Democrat and the next President, Bill Clinton.
I'll tell you, I've been around John Glenn a lot. That's the best darn speech I ever heard him give. That was Let me see if I can remember that. You don't make America stronger by taking Big Bird away from 5-year-olds, school lunches away from 10-year-olds, summer jobs away from 15-year-olds, or student loans away from 20-year-olds. That's a pretty good line. That's a good line. I want to thank our national chairman, Don Fowler, for his tireless work and for being here, and your remarkable state party chair, David Leland, for this incredible event. I thank you, sir, and all who worked on it. I thank all the distinguished officials that are up here on the dais with me, and especially my colleagues, Congressman Sherrod Brown, Congresswoman Marcy Kaptur, and Congressman Tom Sawyer. Thank you for your fine work. I understand two friends out in the audience and former colleagues, your former Attorney General Lee Fisher and your former Governor Dick Celeste. Hello to you wherever you are. Thank you for being here. Ladies and gentlemen, Ted Strickland, is he here? Where are you, Ted? Thank you. Thank you. I want to thank the remarkable Central State University Marching Band. Thank you very much for playing. I'd like to thank the others who performed before I came out here, America's Pride and Darla's Dancers, and Madeline Rivera. Thank you all. I have a very great deal to be thankful to Ohio for, as it has been pointed out. The votes of Ohio on June the 2nd, 1992 made me the nominee of the Democratic Party. The votes of the Ohio delegation in New York City in June of 1992, or July of 1992, officially made me the nominee of the Democratic Party. On election night in 1992 in November, Ohio put the Clinton-Gore ticket over the top, and we thank you for that. More recently, I want to thank especially the people of Dayton for hosting the Bosnian peace talks and giving the United States a chance to play a role in settling the bloodiest conflict in Europe since World War II, promoting peace, saving lives, and thereby avoiding a war which our young people might be drawn into. I thank you for hosting those peace talks. And let me say, having been traveling around the country now for the last couple of weeks, if anybody in this room had anything to do with settling the GM strike, there's 150,000 people that want to thank you too, all across America, for the chance to go back to work. Ladies and gentlemen, most of what needs to be said to the Democrats of Ohio has already been said here tonight. I have a lot of gratitude in my heart. I want to thank all the people from Ohio who now serve or who have served in our administration, and all of you who have helped us to move this country forward. But I want you to understand clearly, without any reservation, that this election represents a turning point in American history. In 1992, the real question was whether we would just sort of continue to drift along or whether we would change the course of America. In 1996, the decision will be between two very different paths of change. There is no status quo option. Now, when I ran for president in 1992, I told you that my vision for America was a country in which every person, without regard to their region, their income, their race, could have a chance to live up to the fullest of their God-given abilities, to share in the American dream if they were willing to work for it. An America that led the world for peace and freedom and prosperity and security. And an America where we valued and respected each other so that we came together around our basic values of work and family and community instead of being divided by the cheap, short-term, divisive tactics that many have used in the other party to divide the American people at every election season. That's the America I want, an America coming together and moving forward and meeting the challenges of the future. And my message to you is that the record that Senator Glenn talked about is not a record to sit on, it's a record to build on. Because what has happened is, for all the progress we have made, you know America still has many challenges. And I think every American understands at some level, maybe just instinctively, that this is not a normal time, that we are going through a period of very profound economic and social change. I believe, and I've said all over America, that our nation today is changing economically more than it has at any time in a century, since people moved in Ohio from the farm to small towns and cities, since they moved from making a living primarily in agriculture to making a living primarily out of manufacturing. Today, the American people and people all over the world are moving from an economy that is based on their national markets to one based on world markets. They're moving, whether they work in the factory, on the farm, or in offices, from an economy where mind is more and more important and muscle is less and less important. They're moving into an economy where workforces are being radically restructured because the little digital chip means that you can communicate more information more quickly with fewer people than anyone would have imagined even 10 years ago. It has been at least 100 years since we have dealt with changes of this scope. And as with every period of great change, there are vast new opportunities created for people, but there is also uprooting and uncertainty. And our great challenge today is to take the positive things that have happened, that Senator Glenn talked about, and build on them to achieve our mission, to provide security to every working family in this country that is willing to work for it, so that everyone will be rewarded for what they do. And to help our people in the great struggles of daily life, to strengthen our families and give all of our kids a childhood, to make all of our streets safe and our environment clean. That is our struggle. And to do it, we have to be willing to change the way the government works, to earn the trust and the confidence of the American people and to make it work again for all. That is what I have been working on. And for all those who would argue against your political preferences and these people in Congress, let me just remind you, think back to where we were 4 or 5 years ago, when the deficit was more than twice as high as it is, when your unemployment rate was 2 points higher, when it seemed like the only new jobs that were coming into the economy were low-wage jobs. No, I don't pretend that we've solved all the problems, but we do have over 8 million new jobs, just like I said. We have cut the deficit, just like I said, and wages are going up again in America for the first time in a decade, and that's something to run on. The first argument, obviously, is the argument Senator Glenn made. The other side, they said if our economic plan passed, it would bring a disaster to America. They were wrong. We don't need to go back to their strategies. They gave us a disaster for America the last time they had the economy. On the other hand, we don't need to stand pat either, as they tried to do in 1992. This is a record to build on, not to stand on. We have to meet the challenges of all those Americans out there who do not feel strong and certain about the future. They are basically 3 groups of Americans. They're the people that live in those inner city neighborhoods and those isolated rural areas where nobody's invested money yet. We need to give people incentives, tax incentives, to put their money there to create private sector jobs, to grow the economy there. We need to put in banks to loan money to people there. If we can provide incentives to invest in foreign countries, we ought to provide incentives to invest in the heartland of America's neighborhoods. The second group of Americans are the Americans who are working harder and harder and harder at hourly wages and never seem to get a raise. And there are a lot of them. And what do we have to do with them? For one thing, we should do no harm. We should reject the other side's budget proposal that would actually reduce the family tax credit that is now providing tax relief to families with incomes under $28,000. The second thing we ought to do is raise the minimum wage. You know, both political parties in America and most politicians talk about family values. Well, that's a good thing to talk about. It's a good thing to be for. There's nothing more important. But there are millions of people out there, my fellow Americans, who are trying to raise children on $4.25 an hour. You can't do that. That's not a family value. We ought to raise it instead of letting it go to a 40-year low. We ought to give these people the certainty that we are fighting for a growing economy and we're trying to open new markets. Do you know we have concluded 200 trade agreements since I have been president, 20 with Japan, and in the areas where we've made new trade agreements, our exports have gone up by 80% with Japan. We've got to give these people a fair break and not let them be worked over in the global economy. We ought to give these families a real tax break, and one of the things we ought to give them is a tax deduction for the cost of all education after high school, a college tax break. We ought to say. And then there's a third group of people. You've been reading a lot about them lately. They're the people that work for these big corporations that are downsizing. What about them? Some of them are average income working people. Some of them look like me. They're 50-year-old white gray-headed men who work for these big companies for 25 or 30 years, and all of a sudden they says, we don't need you anymore. I know you've got 2 kids about ready to go to college. I know you've got problems, but we're sorry you have to go. What about them? Well, you know what? There are several things that we can do. For one thing, we ought to say there are a lot of companies that don't do that to their employees. Let's look at them and find out how they do it and give other companies incentives to treat their folks in a good, positive way. Then we ought to say, if a person loses their job in America, they ought to immediately get a voucher from the federal government worth about $2,500 a year that they can take to the nearest community colleges to immediately go back and learn a new skill and start a new life. And if you lose your job, or if someone in your family gets sick, we ought to change the law. We ought to do it now so that you don't lose your health insurance anymore and you can keep it when you lose your job. And if you go to work for a small company, you still ought to be able to take out a pension plan that you don't lose even if you lose your job. People ought to be able to carry those pensions with them and keep them for a lifetime and protect themselves in their retirement. My fellow Americans, we have to face the challenges of the future because everybody has to know that they can benefit from the new global economy. I am grateful for the 8.4 million jobs. I am grateful that we have set a new record in business formation every year I've been president. I'm glad we're #1 in selling automobiles and semiconductors again. I'm glad that the World Economic Forum in Europe says that we've gone from 5th place before I became president to having the most productive economy in the world for the last 3 years. I'm glad about that. But I won't be satisfied until working together we have created the opportunity for every American who will work for it to make the most of his or her own life and to give all the kids in this country a better future. And you shouldn't be either. Let me say that a big part of that is also getting back to our basic values, to having our communities and our families stronger. We have to help people raise their kids. That's why I was for the family tax credit. This year, 17 million families with incomes of under $28,000 a year will have lower taxes because of that 93 economic plan. That's why I was for the V-chip in the telecommunications bill so that parents would have more control over what their children see on television. I think that's important. That's why our administration was the first in history to say we have to do something about the biggest health problem our young people face today, which is that 3,000 of them illegally start smoking every day, and 1,000 of them will die sooner because of it, and we ought to stop it if we can. We've got to do something about it. And we have to do something to make our streets safer. I'm glad that the crime rate is down, and the welfare rolls are down, and the food stamp rolls are down, and the poverty rolls are down, and the teen pregnancy rate is down. I'm glad about that, but they're all too high, and you know it. And we cannot be satisfied until you turn on the evening news at night, and if you see on the evening news that a terrible crime has been committed, you are surprised instead of numb to it. That's when we know we will have whipped the crime problem. And so I say to you, we need a combination of things. First, let's do what we know works. The FOP, the Fraternal Order of Police, which is one of the biggest chapters in the country here in Ohio, and all the other law enforcement officers in this country helped us write that crime bill that Congress tried to undo a couple of days ago. And we got with them and with people that work on crime in the community, and they said, what works? Community policing works. Put more police on the street. Put them in the neighborhoods. Put them in the schoolyards. Let people know their neighbors. They can lower the crime rate. And folks, all over America, in city after city, where people had given up on crime, the murder rate is down and violence is down. We can do better. We have to do more of that. We also said that we ought to have tougher laws for punishment for people who commit serious crimes. We ought to have a 3 strikes and you're out law, but for kids that get in trouble the first time, we need to try to give them a chance to recover their lives by giving them something to say yes to. And let me tell you, again, it is a sign of the times. The crime rate is down, but the rate of violence among children under 18 is up. There are too many kids out there raising themselves, and we need to support each other in giving them their childhood back. We have to do it. There's been a lot of talk in Ohio about welfare reform. The welfare rolls are down since this administration came in. And even though Congress has not yet passed a welfare reform bill that I can sign that is tough on work but good to children, we have on our own given 37 states permission to get rid of federal rules and find ways to move people from welfare to work. 3 out of 4 people on welfare today are under welfare reform experiments approved by this administration. That is more than the last 2 administrations of the other party put together. We are moving people from welfare to work. We are also doing something we should do more of. This administration has taken the lead in giving America record amounts of child support collections. We can move people off welfare if parents pay what they owe to raise their own kids, and we should insist upon it. If we want America to be what it ought to be, we also have to give our children clean air, clean water, safe food, and a decent environment for the future. For years, there was a serious debate about that. There is no longer a serious debate. We now know we can grow the economy by protecting the environment, and that is what I mean to do. And let me say to you, it is not necessary to balance the budget to shut down the cleanup of toxic waste sites. There are millions of children that live within 3 or 4 miles of toxic waste dumps. We don't need to shut down our efforts to clean them up. It is not necessary to balance the budget to weaken the laws on safe food and clean air and clean water. It is not necessary to undermine the enforcement of the environmental standards of America to balance the budget, and I will not do it. I will not tolerate it. It is wrong. It is wrong. Now, my fellow Americans, we also have to realize that much as we'd like to, just because the Cold War is over, we can't walk away from the rest of the world. I know a lot of people, even in this room, have disagreed with some of the decisions I've made in foreign policy. But let me tell you, we are the world's only superpower now. I try not to meddle. There are some things we can't do. I don't want to be the world's policeman, but we can't walk away. We have to try to be the world's peacemaker. And every time we make peace, every time we make peace for people in other parts of the world, we ensure that we'll be a little safer. Let me tell you, if you just take terrorism, no great nation can hide from terrorism. We saw it at the World Trade Center in New York here. We saw it in Oklahoma City. And when you see bombs blow up innocent civilians in Israel or in London, just remember this. In the world we're living in with computer technology, with open borders, one of our biggest challenges is seeing the people who are terrorists, the people who are drug runners, the people who are organized criminals, and the people who smuggle weapons of mass destruction, including chemical and biological weapons, coming together and working together. I am determined that that will not happen, and I intend to keep us involved with every freedom-loving country in the world that will stand up to the terrorists and the thugs that would rob innocent people of their future. Now, it is in that context that you must see this choice. I don't want to sit on this record. I want to build on it. I want more change, not less. I want a government that is smaller and less bureaucratic. We've given you the smallest government, not the other party that always cursed the federal government, The Democrats have given you the smallest national government in 30 years and the biggest reduction in regulations. But I do believe, we need a doctor? Is there a doctor here? We have somebody who passed out in the heat here. Can we got a doctor? Okay. She's okay. Just wanted more jokes. Let me say, we got another one over here. We need a doctor over there. Now let me say, you have to see this election in these terms. They can say, oh, old veto bill. You bet, and I'm proud of it. And I'd do it again. You look. I want you to look at where the budget negotiations were when they left them to go finish their campaign. They had acknowledged that we didn't need those big Medicare cuts, those big Medicaid cuts, that we didn't have to gut education or environmental protection, that we didn't have to raise taxes on working people. We don't have to raid pension funds. We don't have to do those things. Now, remember this. There is no longer a choice between the status quo and change. There are two real different views of change here. They say the government is the problem, just get out of the way and let things take their course. I say, you remember what happened 100 years ago. The progressive movement that culminated in Franklin Roosevelt, Harry Truman, John Kennedy, Lyndon Johnson, that progressive movement started under a Republican, Teddy Roosevelt. They abandoned him and his tradition, and we shouldn't make the same mistake. We have to stand up for that. I believe that the government of the United States has to, first of all, make us secure, secondly, give us the conditions of a growing economy, and third, work in partnership with the American people so that individuals and families and communities can make the most of their own lives and meet the challenges of this uncertain world. That is the difference between our campaign and theirs. It is clear, unambiguous, and true. So I want you to think about it. Yeah, I vetoed that budget, and I'd do it again. But I don't like it. I'd rather sign the right kind of balanced budget that will lower interest rates, balance the budget, grow the economy, and give your kids a future. That's what I did. And that's the way I feel about welfare reform and health care reform and all these other things. I want to work with the Congress, but the main thing I want is to give you the kind of future you need and deserve. So if you are willing to stand up and fight one more time, we can have an American dream for all Americans in the 21st century. That's what we can have. We can have family values. We can have a free and safe America. We can have a better future. Thank you, and God bless you all. Thank you.